My name is Luís Torrão, and I'm very honored and pleasure to be here at Frog to present you the work Energy for Life, a step towards an energetically sustainable world. I am a sophomore student at the Portuguese Polytechnical Institute of Cavado and Ave, and my degree is Digital Games Development Engineering. This degree has been launched in the former year, and along with it, it has also been taken its first steps, the DIGARC, or Digital Games Research Center. At DIGARC, we have been contacted by OICUS, a Portuguese non-governmental organization for cooperation and development that has a worldwide activity. OICUS is enrolled in the European Union-funded Development Education Campaign on the critical role of renewable energies for poverty reduction and sustainable development. So they wanted us to create a game to be played all over the European continent in schools, and this game should be focused on environment and development. So this presentation renders the work of specifying this game, and we're going to see some game concepts and strategies, the storytelling, game action, and scoring system for now. So we immediately had the insight of what it was going to be the goal of this game, and that was going to be the transmission of knowledge by means of an interactive game. This is to say, we wanted to build a serious game. Since their early appearance in the 1980s, serious game development has gained great strength and had a great variety of applications in education, engineering, defense, and energy management, for example. And we can see it in simplistic quizzes or games of theoretical knowledge or more complex 3D real-life simulations, which is more of what we wanted to do. So, more than a serious game, we wanted to be a serious game for civic education. We wanted the player to absorb, by playing this game, to absorb some values, ideals, and practices in a preferably amusing game. And we thought this could target younger generations, since they can be more receptive to learning socially encouraged behaviors by means of entertainment solutions. So we decided to call this game Energy for Life. And Energy for Life, its main subject would be realistic sustainability. This is to say, optimized use of energy and recycling and reuse. It should outcome a promotion of proactive behaviors within quotidian life of the players. Energy for Life was then to be a hybrid of 3 game types, and this genre to be environmental action. As to its exploration, object combination, dialogue components, and its point-and-click interface, it should resemble more to an adventure role-playing game. As to its score system, it would resemble more a systemic interconnected choices game, like The Sims, despite we wanted it to have some tasks to be accomplished in the game. As to its resource manipulation and localization, we wanted to present an interactive map where everything was set up and the player could enjoy the game, so it would resemble more to a strategy game. As to its visualization, we wanted to present a 3D perspective where a fixed camera would show one scene at a time. We have here an example of this sort of game, this 3D role-playing game, which is Matahari. So the idea was to have these sequences of scenes in a scenario, and so the player could change from one scene to the other, from one room to the other, and it could walk freely within the scene and avoid object collision and interaction and making interactions, etc. So about its story, we wanted to present something that could be more interesting to the player, so we decided to flip the time order of the game and present the story in an inverse timeline. So the player would begin in the future, and then by flashbacks he would go back to the present. In the future, the player would know the two main characters, which have responsibilities on definition of the country's environmental policies, so they work in the government. And then by flashbacks, they would go into the main character's childhood. The idea was to have basically two games inside the game, one in the future and the other in the present, so, and these two games would inter-influence each other. In the future, the player would see the difficulties faced by the main character's political facet, and then returning back in time, he would be able to improve the main character's youth behaviors. So these are the main characters, Mika and Mina. This is a story of two young heroes. They are best friends, and they live a normal life, but something is about to happen to them. One night, they both have the same dream. They share a dream, and this was more like a nightmare. They saw a big catastrophe coming to the earth. There was a grey and heavy sky, polluted seas, avenues filled with abandoned cars. The air was intoxicated. The rivers could not uphold any more polluting sewage, and the horizons were colossal dumps. They were very worried, and in that dream, at a moment, appears a new character, which is Mother Earth, the spirit of Mother Earth. She comes to them crying, and she says that humanity had been alerted, but they didn't mind. The humanity had been alerted that recycling and reuse and energy management was the only solution for the Earth's problems. And Mika and Mina decided immediately they wanted to offer their help. It was time to wake up, and it was time to make a change. So the present time, its action takes place in a scenario, which is the present, the home scenario. And here we see a simple diagram of this scenario. It's Mika or Mina's house. So it has two rooms, one living room, one bathroom, one kitchen, and one terrace. They can move freely within the space. They will have to interact with objects and non-playing characters. In the future, we can see now Mika and Mina, 20 years have passed, and they were the kind of people that always follow their dreams, and Mother Earth is on their hearts and on their minds, so they have lived their life for environmental welfare, and in their studies also, so they are now recognized scholars of ecology. As I said before, they work in the government, so they are in contact with this other character, which is the Prime Minister. Well, this character is almost always absent in social affairs, and Mika and Mina are his special advisors. When he's absent, he leaves Mika and Mina to replace him because he doesn't want his ministers and secretaries to fall into confusion. Here we see the physical scenario of the government scenario of the future time, and here we see the scene of the Prime Minister's cabinet, and we can see an element of interaction on the top of his desk, which is a blue screen. We see this important room, which is the Minister of Industry's cabinet, with also two elements of interaction: the monitor in front of on top of the desk, and the big panel. Here we see a very important room in the government scenario, which is the energy room. From here, the player can control all the power plants of the country. So there are multiple screens that show that permit to see how's it going with the country's energy. So this is the energetic headquarters of the country. And finally, we have the press room, which is also very important, because it's here that all decisions taken by the government, which is to say the player, are communicated to the public opinion, which is going to have a very important role in the game. So, Energies for Life concept is based on a realistic sustainability and optimized use of energy. It tries to encourage the player to understand that daily tasks that cannot be avoided can be perfected for lower energetic consumption. So the objective is that the player can get some learning from his domestic experience and then expand that knowledge from the home scenario to the government scenario, to a macro scenario. So we thought that this way the player could understand how important micro decisions are for the overall picture, and on the other hand, it could also understand how difficult it is to take governmental decisions, because they really affect everyone's lives. So there is here a metaphor of cause and effects, and there are really two games being played, and good decisions will make the player win the game. In the game, there are several non-playing characters and objects. The player can or will mandatorily have to make interactions with several non-playing characters and objects, and initially the game will work as a tutorial where the non-playing characters and the objects will be self-explanatory, so that the player can understand how to play the game. Then, for example, in the home scenario, some NPCs will incite the player to put some order in the house by, for example, assuming some different roles, such as turning on the lights when nobody's in the room, or turning on the TV when nobody's watching, and then the player should correct his behaviors, and that would improve his score. I'm going to show you some of the objects in the home scenario. For example, we have the television set that can be on or off, and if it is on, it could be simply on, or it could be playing ecologically themed documentaries. The lamps, for example, are all over the house, and they can be on and off, and if they're on, they will be more or less efficient if they're incandescent, halogen, fluorescent, or compact fluorescent lamps. The windows and the shutters work together as a means of the player to control the temperature inside the house, so they can be closed or opened, and in the case of the windows, they can be changed by the player, so they can be in a normal state, or cold, or thermic. Here we have the shutter that can be on and that can be closed or open. Then we have some electronics in the house also, like the air conditioning and the central heating. Here the player can install them in the house, and they can, if they're installed, they can be on or off. We have also the kitchen apparel, like the stove, the refrigerator, the washing machine and drying machine. They are pre-installed as Class B apparel, but if the player wants to, he can install Class A apparel, which is more efficient energetically, and they can be on and off also. And then finally we have the hanger and the shower that can simply be in use or not. So we had many variables in this game, and we wanted to build a scoring system for the game, and this was a bit challenging because on one hand we had like two different games, the home game and the government game, present and future, and there were many variables involved, so we decided, well, let's have an overall scoring system for the entire game, but then particularize for a home and government scenario. So in the overall scoring system we have the credits, and in the home scenario we have the energy efficiency points, 10 of which are equivalent to 1 credit. And in the government scenario, we have 100. We have the green energy points, which is good energy; the red energy points, which is the bad energy. They are negative points, and the budget points, which is the government budget, and satisfaction points. Well, 100 of these points are equivalent to 1 credit. Here we can see an example of how this works. In the home scenario, an incandescent light will outcome 10 energy efficiency points every 30 seconds and cost 5 energy efficiency points every 30 seconds. And the complete fluorescent light will outcome 30 energy efficiency points every 30 seconds and costs only 1 energy efficiency points every 30 seconds. On the other hand, in the government scenario, we have a list of the multiple power plants that can be in the game: the gas, the coal, the oil, the nuclear, biomass, wind, solar, and hydrogen wave power plants. So if they're non-renewable energy sources, they're going to outcome red energy points. And if they're not, if they're renewable, they're going to outcome green energy points, which is good energy. Then they have also an impact on the public opinion, so they can outcome satisfaction points. To build this scoring system, we had to make some calculations. They are only here to be mentioned. Well, concluding about the scoring system, the system tries to be uplifting but not moralistic, because the player can make ruinous decisions all over the game. For example, in the government, the player can decide to collect waste, nuclear waste, for example, from a neighboring country, and that will give him additional funds in a short term. But then it will not improve his score, because later on the population will be greatly unsatisfied and more hostile, and so that will impact on taxes and governance performance. It is also important to mention that in the home scenario there is the temperature system. Well, we have a bar in the game that goes from violet, very cold, to red, very hot, and then in the middle we have the green, the biological comfort. Whenever the temperature exceeds or comes out of the biological comfort level, the player is going to lose points. So he has to control the windows, the shutters, the central heating all the time, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the night, so that the temperature inside the house is always in a biological comfort level. We had to validate this scoring system. So hypothetically, we created 3 players. Player 1, which is a spender, and he likes traditional electronics, and on a political side of view, he likes traditional energy sources also. And then player 2 and player 3, that are very similar. They are not spenders. They always use Class A electronics in the home scenario, and in the government scenario there is the difference. Player 2 thinks nuclear power is the future, but player 3 believes that renewable power plants that they are important to be chosen. So if we see the results of these 3 hypothetical players, we see that player 1 has a rather low final score. Player 2 has a very good score in the home scenario, but then in the government scenario he loses almost all his points. And player 3, which is the ideal player, has a very good score in the home scenario and also in the government scenario, ending up by winning the game. So we have seen some game concepts, strategies, storytelling, game action, and the scoring system. And now I would like to show you some ecological concepts and pedagogy that we try to apply it in the game, and some conclusions. So, as you've seen in their adult life, Mick and Min are academics of ecology. This is a way that the game tries to introduce the player to this science. So ecology, the study of the relationships between living creatures to each other and to the environment, is nowadays a mainstream subject, as in popular culture as in academic culture. So the study of life cycles, populations and environment has yielded the tools for the prediction of effects of human actions, hence the abandonment of nefarious practices in the common sense. So we try to introduce ecology as a science, but also in a political point of view. And we do it inspired by Luc Ferry's reflection on democratic ecologism. Luc Ferry is the former minister of the French government of education and is a recognized philosopher, and his democratic ecologism is characterized because it is distinct from deep ecologism. It's not very radicalized, and it's distinct from the Cartesian anthropocentrism, which is to say, it doesn't believe that man is the center of it all, but it is a part of nature and has responsibilities to nature. On the other hand, this democratic ecologism relies on a democratic reformist sensibility. So, Mika and Mina in the government scenario must make political decisions that will be successful if they agree with the principles of democratic ecologism. As to pedagogy, we wanted to create a game for adolescents and pre-adolescents, so we thought some psychological knowledge could help us more consciously create a game and inclusively apply some pedagogy. So we wanted to produce a change of mentality in teens. So we thought the game should work as an object of recognition, and that is why we chose representation of real life, and we chose a set of characters to whom the players could identify. Identity to Erickson is a stage where abilities, interests, and Erickson says that abilities, interests, and needs and desires are elements that are combined in the process of building identity, and that process ends up with the choice of a profession and the adoption of inherent values. So adolescence is a moment for personal and ideological compromise that brings confidence. Mika and Mina at first have no environmental concerns, but influenced by Mother Earth, they acquire a set of ecological values that define their future lives. So the objective here was to trigger the interest in environment and influence the identity process in teens to the assumption of greener conducts. The game tries not to be moralistic in a doctrinary point of view, but morality is an important element of the learning process it promotes. Kohlberg defines morality in 3 stages. 2 of them occur in our game, in our players' age ranges, and those are the conventional morality and post-conventional morality. In conventional morality, patterns of authority figures are internalized, and there is a moral objective of being good and pleasing the others. And in the post-conventional morality, more mature one, the moral patterns established collide with self-conscious morality, and so this collision generates a critical morality. So the game tries to work in both ways, for the 2 age ranges, to promote the emergency of ecological morality. Since it presents Mother Earth's good ecological conduct, the example, and on the other hand, it demonstrates the player the negative consequences of its absence, the reason why the player could lose the game. There are also roles played in the game. I'm not going to show that. So concluding, the game's key concepts are energy consumption efficiency and recycling and reuse. The game's architecture relies on a cause-effect metaphor that allows the player to enjoy 2 interconnected games, dependent on each other, as the game action divides itself into 2 chronological moments. The greatest difficulties we found in specifying this game were approaching the game's theme and purpose, because it was very challenging to build a game that was meant to promote recycle and reuse and energy efficiency, and on the other hand, it was also very challenging the conception of a scoring system that would work, because we had in practically 2 games and multiple variables, which is difficult to control. For future work, we'd like to conduct evaluation experiments by means of questionnaires and other means to validate the pedagogical effects of the game. We want to know if there really is a learning outcome from this game, and we think that would be useful for future serious game development. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you liked this presentation, and now I'd like to answer your questions.
So thank you, Luis, for your presentation. And I can see that the gamer party had some casualties last night, but those of us who are here have been surely inspired by Luis's talk and have some questions. So we can take a couple of questions. Doris?
Yeah, thanks, Luis. Wow, quite a project, really complex. I can see that it probably took some processing. I came 2 minutes late, so maybe you said it in the beginning. In which context do you expect this game to be played?
This game is to be played in schools all over the European continent. It comes from a program funded by the European Union, and it was asked to us to build this. It was Oikos, a non-governmental organization with a worldwide activity, that had asked us to create this game. So the objective is to be played all over the European continent in schools for pre and adolescents, and it should promote ecological awareness and care for development. That's it.
Okay, any more questions here? Okay.
I have two questions regarding the gameplay, actually. First of all, you said there is a final score, so my question would be how long one sitting of the game, so to say, does take? How long does the game take to be played, especially because you said that it's thought to be played in schools? And then the other question would be, is the storyline of the game does the player have very much freedom in playing the game, or is it a very strict storyline? Is the gamer thought to be following a story path, or do they explore the various aspects of the game very freely?
Well, first of all, the second question, yes, they have all the freedom to move within the scenarios, within each scene. And so there is not a story, a line to follow in the game. The game happens naturally. And as to the first question, well, it's meant to be played in schools, so it has a restrict time to be played in a classroom, for example. But it can be played almost ad infinitum. So.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Doris, one more question?
What are incentives for players to play as an ecologically conscious person?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Are there any incentives? Why should somebody want to play in an ecological conscious way?
First of all, they're almost being forced to play it because it's going to be played in schools, in classes, and I suppose that there's going to be a debate in the classroom before playing the game and all that. So this should be a part of an educational program. But of course, is there any motivation? Well, there could be a motivation to play the game, but actually the game was made for being played in schools in a particular time in the agenda.
That was not what I meant. So, but if I play the game, I want to achieve something within the game. I want to win something. Is it just that I score the highest points in the end?
Yes.
Or,
well,
yeah. Okay.
To have a good score, you should have the best decisions when it comes to energetic efficiency in the home scenario. So you should well control all the details about how domestic energy is being spent and all that. You could change the apparel to A class, you could turn off the lights when they're not being used, etc. And in the government scenario, you can win the game if you make political decisions that promote the democratic ecologism. this is to say, you have, I haven't explained because there isn't much time, but you have many power plants in the country. You have to control the entire energetic system of the country. And you have to decide if you want to have non-renewable power plants or, on the other hand, renewable power plants. And that's going to make a great influence in your final score. Or, for example, there are relations with foreign countries. For example, relative to development, helping other countries to develop, and all those decisions, if they are positive in a sense of ecological awareness and developmental awareness, then they will improve the score.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure you will be able to answer additional questions during the poster
Okay.
session time.